Hey, yeah.
Hi, Stephanie.
Is it another time for another episode of Too Long for a Call? Or is it not?
It is because it's Monday morning and it's the best way to start the week.
I
For
love
you,
it.
it's midday, but for me, it's the best start of the week when we get to catch up on life and work and AI and anything in between.
Yes, yes. Just before we hit record, like we weren't even planning to record. We were having this discussion about homeschooling, about the intent, unshakable intent behind making decisions, big life decisions. You said let's dig deeper into this. So I want to turn this to you because fairly recently you took the decision that you are going to start homeschooling as of this year or next year.
It's already this year. It's actually starting in June now when school is over, and I'm not sending the kids to a summer camp. I will instead keep them at home and do activities with them. And some of them are gonna be things where I'm involved in, like taking them to the park, taking them to a museum, things that we usually do on weekends, but now really utilize the week for that. But there would also be a big portion of it which will be using AI to create this homeschooling schedule for them so they can advance at their own pace on areas that they need to, but through content that they are excited about. So I will use the AI to modify information for them.
So I can't help to ask, like, what got you to make this decision? And I really want to unpack this because generally, like, there's a lot of misconceptions and prejudices about homeschooling from the culture where the two of us originally come from. This seems like a hysterical thing to do because, you're doing something that is so different from what is established. And also, like in the US, homeschooling is often related with religious organizations. So really, I really want to understand and like expand and dig deeper in our conversation today about your reasons and why you believe like this is the best thing for your kids and the way you imagine to do it.
All right. So let's dig deeper into it. What is homeschooling? I think that you touched upon our conditioning. Homeschooling was not an option. I don't think it's even legitimate option today in both Bulgaria and Denmark, our societies. And I think that at least until the kids graduate primary elementary school, they are not allowed to not be signed up in an institution in both of these societies. So there is no alternative to the institutions. You can go the private way or the public way, but this is as much choice as you have. So what is homeschooling? Homeschooling is an option of education where the kid follows the curriculum of their age group, but learns at their own pace at home. I can only speak about Florida as a state of the US, requires minimal compliance with the public school curriculum. In Florida, the only requirement as a homeschooler is that a kid passes an exam at the end of the year. That is the only thing you as a homeschooler for the entire year need to show as a result. So, homeschooling is this alternative option to educate your kid in a different manner. As you said, in some of the communities, this has been taking place for a long period, especially closed communities, whether they are doing it for religious reason or as a way to counter racism or bullying or some other disturbance they're experiencing in a local community. And then there is this small portion of new emerging group of parents like us who are tech savvy, who are believers in the opportunities given to us through these new technologies and their agency to do better for their kids. And this is really a new group of parents who are essentially taking the education and care for their kids in their own hands. They're resourceful parents, they are highly educated people who haven't found a fit through the system and have the privilege to be able to dedicate more hours of their day to give the attention necessary to their kids. So it's not for everyone, it comes from a lot of privilege, but it is an emerging group of people, especially what I'm seeing among that community of tech people who are optimizers of
Mm.
their work, optimizer of their lifestyle, and now they are taking the education of their kids in their own hands and are looking for ways to optimize that too.
So you've always been a person that is doing things with an intent and out of a certain conviction. And the example that you're giving about optimizing your life, like living your life through a certain intent and like using that intent like to modify it, like, certain aspects of the way that you're living, the way that you're spending your time with family. What is the intent behind this? Because obviously there's something bigger that is behind a decision like this. It's not a light decision because essentially it's a change of lifestyle. It's a change to the way that you would spend your time. Like sending your kids to school obviously comes like with a lot of benefits because suddenly like you have all that time on your hands. Could you speak a little bit about
These are such good questions because you really need to have the conviction of what your purpose is, what your ultimate best life is in order to take such a decision because you are giving up a lot of freedom. You said it very well. You send your kids to school for 7 to 8 hours a day. Now you give that up. Why? And here is already where the frame breaks because with that frame of mind, I'm giving up something. But by the intention that I'm living my life with, which is to live a happy life, connected life, and give as much love and support to those closest to me. My life mission is empower 10 people in my life, make their life better because I exist. If I cannot give that to my children, it wouldn't matter as much if I gave it to strangers. My starting point is this value system, this intention to live my life in this way. I'm really not giving up anything. I am simply being brave to live my life according to my value system. That case, I can approach it from a positive standpoint. I'm gaining here. I am gaining quality time with the people I most desire to impact positively in my life. And I'm gaining now this opportunity to spend time to shape them up, to invest in their enablement. It's a no brainer in that case. You see how it's really the perception of the situation. I took this decision, I would say, lightly. And most of my community of really incredible parents that are around us, I faced mixed emotions because most people approached it from what are you giving up? The frame of mind is what you're giving up. If it's about giving up, you're giving up a lot of things. But none of these things matters in the light of what you're gaining.
So it makes an impression on me that you're very clear on what matters and what's important for you in your life. Because a decision like this is very big. Like I said earlier, it's choosing a very different lifestyle, but it seems like you're very calm about this decision because you know what is important for you and what is not important for you. Um, have you always been like this? Have you always known what matters for you and have been able like to take decisions in this way?
I had a hard time deciding when I was a kid, and I particularly remember the situations when I was exposed to a shelf full of candies, and I had a certain budget given from my mom, and I would take a waffle. And then next second I would be like, oh no, wait a second, this little chocolate also matches my budget. So I will keep changing my mind, and my mom would get crazy by the end of this because she will be like, you have to decide and stick to it. So I'll be in this analysis paralysis mode, and the only thing that will counter it is that at some moment of time she's gonna lose patience and say, I count to 10 And whatever you have in your hand, that's the thing you're getting. As I grew up, for the most important things in my life, I was a very aware kid of my own value system or opinion. And I felt that I can live according to it. I remember that I didn't like bullying in the classroom. It was third grade where there was this kid that was getting severely bullied by another kid in the classroom. And sometimes the jokes were like quite funny, and it was easy to jump on the laughing mood and excuse it with, "Oh," but I didn't say it, that person said it. And I was very aware that what comes around goes back around, and that if I did not want to be in that situation, I cannot do that to someone else. And then I would put this as a value system for myself and be like, my value system is to never bully others. Okay. And then I'll be like, check. Almost like in the absence of religious upbringing, I created my 10 commandments where I would live according to them because I felt the need to live my life with intention and according to a value system. Another one was like, we were around fifth grade, and some of my best friends from school started sneaking in the school recess to buy cigarettes, which you could do as an 11-year-old at this time of these years, and smoke. And something held me back. I was clear on the idea that these are my friends and I will not select different friends because of their life choices, but I will not take the same life choice. And it was so funny because when you're so determined in your life choice, other people, they try to bring in on their life choices at some moment. But when you're value driven, they very quickly give up because they see they cannot change this opinion. And I think I was a very strong minded kid because nobody excluded me. Nobody excluded me from the group of kids that were smoking cigarettes in fifth grade. I was part of the group, but I stood 5 meters away from everyone, and I had these little perfumes that were called Bonnie Bombs, and I was standing with them ready to spray on them so they don't get caught for smoking. And this was my contribution to the group so I can still belong without getting immersed into something that was against my value system. So, in a way, I do think that I was a very strong willed kid, and it wasn't easy to sway me around. And as a grown up, it served me well in entrepreneurship. And as a parent, it has served me even better because ultimately, the impact I'm doing to my decisions for my kid, I see it as a positive right now.
Oh man, I do remember the Bonibon perfumes.
Very strong smell.
Yeah, they sure smelled like the early 2000s. But this is a very interesting thing because I was about to ask you if you were excluded from the group because of your strong convictions, but it seemed that you had gained kids' respect. Like, it's really impressive that you had like that kind of like thinking at the age of 11, especially at that age where it's so important for kids to fit in. Usually, most kids would do the things that would be socially safer, and increase their chances like to get in. Like, that's actually one of the reasons why so many kids start smoking and drinking. Like, it's not because it's tasty, really. It's just because that's the rite of passage, you know. If we go back like to the topic of homeschooling, you have something in mind that seem to believe it's a better way of raising your kid. And I want to understand, like, what do you imagine that experience would be? What would you be able to give your kid through homeschooling that you don't think the educational system would be able to provide or to match?
That's a very important point. And the thing is that my kids are already going in one of the best schools in the area. Like, it's an incredible, caring environment with a lot of tailored attention. It's Montessori school, it's multi age classrooms. Every kid gets individual schedule and advances at their own pace, although they're under the same grade. It's already as good as it can be. And kudos to the educators there and the school. it's really wonderful. And I think it gave them a really good foundation that we can now build upon. And the reason why I'm changing from that really good setup is because I believe that there are too many musts in a curriculum and too few want to. And now my son, he's very excited about racing cars and spending an enormous amount of awake hours thinking about racing, thinking about sports. And realistically, in a day driven by an institution, no matter how great it is, you are subject to 8 hours of other things. And academic learning might be 2-3 hours. And then there is all kinds of other activities that fills it in, and academic learning expands more because it's a classroom of more kids and it goes at a slower pace. And so the day becomes this day of spending time on the must do's. Then the kids come home and it's must do homework, must do sports, must do other activities. And before you know it, the time for the passion, the one thing that kid is obsessing about and thinking about, shrinks down to a half an hour a day, even with the best intention to enable him. And I just thought for a moment and I made a calculation and said, well, if it doesn't have to be this way, what would life look like if he had 9 hours on passion and 2 to 3 hours on the must do's? How would that change the trajectory of his life? And it really doesn't matter what kind of passion it is, but just cultivating the muscle from such an early age that when you do something, you do it properly, you do it with dedication, you do it obsessively, you do it meticulously. That is what I want to cultivate. And I see as my job. From there on, it's his job to choose what this is. And the fact that he would have prolonged time during a day to explore different fields and explore different hobbies will mean that he would be able to apply it in different areas. Okay, now it's racing cars. Maybe he'll double down on that. But maybe he would start obsessing about tennis. Maybe he'll start obsessing about gardening. Regardless what it is, I want to be there to be an enabler to that passion.
Man, I just wish that I had that type of childhood, because you and I, we come from a system that by design is it's very heavy on fact learning and it's very heavy on reproducing knowledge. But for the most part, really, like the educational system that we had in Bulgaria was compliance training, which is pretty much most of the educational systems in most European countries. That system originated in Prussia and was designed to instill discipline and subordination in the population. Because when you look at it from a structural point of view, the educational system is in service of the state. And the state has very different needs from the needs of the individual. And this is not some kind of a conspiracy theory. It's just how a state functions. And the state needs workers, the state needs soldiers, the state needs people that comply with the structures and systems so that the state can continue to function and grow and sustain its power. And this is where it gets tricky, because on one hand, we've been led to believe that the state means civilization and it's our means to safe and prosperous life. But some could also argue that all of the problems of modern civilization are linked to the concentration of power in the hands of states. But without going like too philosophical here, I remember the first time when you told me this, and my first reaction when you said, well, right now he's spending a lot of time doing the must-haves and not so much doing the want. And my first thought was, well, he needs to learn to do the things that he doesn't want to do because that's the way the life is. To which you said, but it doesn't need to be. We've had the life like this, but who says that it needs to be like this, that we gotta do all the things that we don't want to do? And guess what? As an adults, we continue doing this. And I specifically noticed this. Bulgarian language, it's a very different, like the word that we use for must. It just has like that emotional heaviness to it. The emotion is very different when you say that you want to do something or that something is good for you and that you're choosing. And the other thing is a must, meaning that it's outside of your control. It's been imposed on you and you don't have a choice. You gotta do this. And I've noticed that sometimes I would have good intentions and I would want myself like to do something that's productive and for my well-being. But when I treat myself in this kind of way that I must do it, I should do it at least that many times a week, etc., I stopped taking pleasure in these things. I was just complying to some arbitrary schedule that I've created and not like to my own curiosity and interest.
And it's a really fine line, because in order to excel at something, you're going through the initial phase of passion and dopamine of something new, right? But then as you learn more, it gets harder and you reach some plateau in your abilities as a newbie. And really, the only way to advance beyond that is to keep pushing. There is no other way. It's not fun because you still don't have the skills to master this activity. You don't have the sufficient knowledge, and it's an uphill battle. It's actually painful. The dopamine doesn't rush through your body anymore because it's not as novel, and you're now faced with the choice to give up or keep going. And this is with any activity that you're going through. It's a very valid choice to give up at that moment of time and treat it as a must do. The question is, do you find purpose in this? That is an intrinsically driven purpose, something that will keep you going when you don't have the support of the hormones on your side. And I think that it was really eye-opening for me when I was listening to this one Danish guy who is an entrepreneur on the global scene. He has built a company through very intentional life choices, software choices, work choices. Him and his co-founder have written multiple books on the way they work. And in one podcast, he was talking about this phenomena where by now he picks up new activities and new skills really easily because he has retrained his brain to go through this plateau. And says the interest kicks in after the plateau. So the first thing is, yes, it's the fascination, is the new thing. That's dopamine. We can get it about pretty much about anything. But then we're faced with the reality. It's hard, it's draining, it's resource demanding, right? And this is the phase where we give up. But if we keep going, actually, if we have cultivated a brain of curiosity and we start getting better, there is nothing more fun than being good at something and doing it with joy. Right? You knew nothing about cooking, you learned some basics and foundational things. Now it's fun. Maybe it's not your favorite thing. Maybe you're not going to become a world-renowned specialist, but you're going to make your own food with delight.
This is an interesting thing because I immediately see the comparison between I find this interesting and I choose to do it because, I feel better every time. I feel competent. There is joy in executing this. And then there is the external thing that it comes down from Western society. Can you become the best in this? Can you become world renowned? Can you, build a business around this? Which is something that personally for me really derails from that mission and that intent that comes from within. Because if you find joy, if you're curious about this, if you have an unshakable belief that you're doing this because you, by some way, whatever it is, universe, God, it's been transmitted to you that this is the way that you're cooking, this is the way that you're driving. And you don't need to seek out external validation to test whether this is the right way because you know it. It's in your DNA. It's just encoded in you. Then the external becomes irrelevant. And I was referencing before this conversation, a book that I'm reading, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And there's just these two characters. This character, his name is Howard. He's very weird in many ways, but he has a very clear vision for the type of architecture he wants to do. He's a modernist and he's uncompromising, not because he wants to decorate himself with self-importance, but he's like this because this is what he believes in. Like there is no other way for him. It's inconceivable for him to do it any different way. Whereas the other character, Peter, he doesn't have a clear vision. He has been told his whole life by his mother how he should be. So he's seeking out the external. He's seeking out the approval. He's mimicking what is deemed to be successful, and he wants to inherit this success. And that's his end goal, essentially, like just to be successful, to be at the top, to be liked and approved. He's manipulative. He's using people. He is engaging in things that are immoral because he doesn't have a clear compass. So what I really like about your intent and your approach is that what you want to cultivate in your kids is that they can hear out what's inside of them, and they can choose to double down on this and really develop that unshakable confidence that they are actually worth it, and whatever they have as an opinion is something that matters, and to rely more on their internal guidance and not so much on the external world.
That's the goal. That's, I think, a universal goal of any parent. But again, it comes down to how aware are you of your goal and how much effort are you willing to put towards it. Because I can see that if I approach this task through the lens of sacrifice, I will fail. Am I sacrificing my time? Would I have more time if I'm not doing this? Sure. Would I have more time for my own passion? Sure. Would I have more time for my businesses? Sure. Would I have more time to do sports? Sure. Like if my entire lens is the sacrifice and the give up, the only thing I will achieve is an enormous amount of expectations put on the kids, because now they better live up to this sacrifice that I'm doing for them. A lot of anxiety on my side because I'll be the whole time comparing to what else I could have been doing instead.
And we have plenty of examples of parents saying these things to their kids, or what, you should be way more grateful than you are. Like, do you know what I have given up for you? And then they will start listing all the things that they have piled up in the list of resentment over the years.
Here's the interesting thing: the kid never asked the parent to give up these things, right? And this is when we make half choices, when the parent has made a choice, but they're not willing to live by that choice. And I can catch myself in this situation sometimes because parenting often feels ungrateful. Like you're often not getting the feedback or the reward that you anticipate. Just a basic example, spending half an hour, 40 minutes cooking a dish that you were 100% sure that they would love and it's highly nutritious, and you could have bought pizza from the local supermarket, but you instead, and you gave up your fitness for the day to make this, and they just poke around with the fork and say, "Bleh, I'm not gonna eat that." It feels like you're entitled to say, "Do you know what I gave up to make you this food? Do you know I could have been at the fitness?" But it is your own responsibility. You gave it up. Nobody asked for it. And unless you're willing to live with the fact that even though you gave it up, it might not be successful, you're gonna have this remorse. You really need to be willing to do it for a bigger reason. And that bigger reason being something that is beyond the current moment. That beyond the current moment, when they don't want to eat that nutritional food, the reward is that you still did the right thing. You still offered nutritious food to your kids, and you still embedded in their mind that this is what dinner looks like instead of a preheated pizza from the supermarket.
It makes me think about what you're saying is essentially the difference between doing something good with and without a cherished outcome, and the difference between them. Because I recently got to adjust my own beliefs about the way that I want to live my life, and I figured out that, with everything that's happening in my country and everything that's happening in the world, it's very easy to lose faith, because it seems like there's things that are so much bigger than us. But I realized that What matters to me is to live life in the way that I believe is right and to act out in the way that I believe I, as a man, want to be and a society should be. But the key realization for me was to do it without a cherished outcome, because there is that much that I can do as an individual. I cannot hold expectations that things will happen in a way that I want in 5 or 10 years. I believe that they can, but doing it without a cherished outcome really just protects me from like losing belief and helps me keep going. And I kind of relate this to what you're saying when you're cooking the dinner. You have a clear intent, like you want your kids to be healthy, right? So that's why you put the effort. That's why, you say, you know what, I'm gonna skip exercise. I'm gonna make the good food for them. But if you had that cherished outcome that they would eat it, they would like, mom, you know what, you're the best. You're investing in our health. And for that, we're eternally grateful, right? Like you would set yourself to huge disappointment as a parent, and your kids would never live up to. And we're only human. Like, of course, like I fall into this trap as well with my partner. I figured that it's so much easier to live life without without really expecting things from other people. But when it happens, then it's amazing. And it's a gift that has been given to you.
Yeah.
That you've been seen and appreciated.
That's true. It really is. When you were discussing this point about building your life on a passion, like doing something with a conviction, I just remember when we graduated university, you and me from the same program in international marketing and sales. Very important.
That's right. That's why I wear a tie.
It didn't take you more than a month before you announced yourself a designer. Incomprehensible. It was like, dude, you just graduated sales and you call yourself a designer, like on the basis of what? And looking in the rear mirror, you did it out of such a fundamental belief in yourself, in the direction, in the choice you're making, that it didn't really matter whether it has materialized at that moment of time. Today, you're a phenomenal designer. That would be indisputable how fantastic of a designer you are. Nobody will guess you graduated international marketing and sales.
I think there's going to be more doubt about my sales abilities than my design abilities.
Maybe that's where the degree really kicked in.
Yeah. I got to thank myself for being delusional enough to being 22 and just believing that anything is possible. There was nobody around that moment to tell me that it doesn't make sense to start a design practice without a diploma, without a network, in an environment that was generally like not super happy about, Europeans. So I thank myself for being delusional, for giving myself like that practical example that, you know what? Yes, it is going to take a lot of time, like to really develop that skill and become good. But if this is really what is important to you, if this is what you really want to do, just do it, Just do it. You can learn it. Back then it was easy. Like today is even easier. Like you have a personal coach that can tailor knowledge to your level, to your curiosity. Like this is unprecedented. Knowledge used to be so precious. Like it was so few people could read, even less could write. And knowledge was basically pretty much in monasteries and libraries. Like you have all the knowledge adapted exactly to your level of understanding. Like, how phenomenal is this?
Isn't this the best time of human evolvement for homeschooling then?
Absolutely.
The time for the revolution is now. As parents, we are given the most incredible tool to enable life based on passion for our kids.
Now that you said revolution, it got me thinking about, wait, like for the most part of history, it wasn't teaching this way. You would have like small communities and like kids would run around and like they would pick up knowledge from the adults and the older kids. At some point you had apprenticeship where the kid would go and they would learn a trade. by actually looking and doing, but like that modern education of where kids are grouped by age and they have a strict curriculum and they progress based on their age, not on their knowledge or their interest. You could even argue that this is the exception rather than what has been the norm for all these centuries of human development.
Yeah. And first of all, we limited the amount of role models for kids through the classroom setup. Because as you said, before kids could model up the parents and the rest of the grown-ups in a community, because they'll be around them in the realistic life all day long, not just this confined, limiting environment of a classroom, four walls, and one teacher that's the source of all knowledge and experience. But if you think about that, even in the setup of more freedom, where you could learn from everyone in your village, you still could only learn the things they knew. And this is where a recent interview with Dr. David Eagleman, who's a neuroscientist and puts out very interesting work around AI and the human brain and how incredibly enabling these technologies for the curious minds. He made these comparisons that, well, back in the days, you couldn't envision being a neuroscientist, being a couture fashion designer. If there was not nobody in your village that was doing that, you wouldn't see. You wouldn't be exposed to that skill in order to spark the curiosity. Hey, I can be that. I can do that. And he was arguing actually a bit controversially for the role of social media and exposing kids to this variety of things that they can be, because literally now you can see a kid in southern South Africa dancing a dance, and you could be in the northern Europe, Scandinavia, and you can learn the same dance and suddenly become expert in it for something that your local community knows nothing about.
Yeah, and same with skills. I'm really amazed like with that part of social media and seeing like the new generation in Bulgaria. I saw the other day like there was this kid that was doing its own fashion design, and he did like a hoodie that was inspired by the tulip flower, and then there was another one that was inspired by the communist type of blocks. So he had created like these pockets kind of mimic like the structure of the blocks. What I found interesting about it was that here is a person that is doing something that's very different, and it's doing it in the context of my own culture. I really like the fact that you see young people that care about very different things. They're doing good work.
Yeah. And that wouldn't happen in traditional education because you simply wouldn't have enough time to explore
Mm.
the different activities, different options, follow this curiosity and double down on something, because there is no time to double down. When we were kids, one kid would like biology and hope that the biology class was 3 hours a day because they couldn't get enough of biology. But then the rest of the kids hated it, and already on the 10th minute were shouting and disturbing the classroom and so on. I was really nothing that the first kid who's passionate about that subject could do to change their circumstances. And it really made acquiring knowledge very inefficient.
Yeah.
I really believe in the individual enablement we are going to achieve through these new tools and the revolution we're going to experience us as grown-ups, as experts and shaped up people, but even more so our children who are truly going to be raised in these circumstances and have their brains develop in that nourishing brains environment. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited too. I feel optimistic. And I enjoy our conversations, and we're going to talk more about this. As you're doing it, I'm going to be asking you questions, and I'm going to be learning from you, and you will be sharing your experience and the things that you're learning as you're going.
I'm sure it will be a steep learning curve for me too. Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you, Yana.